To be here with all of you this afternoon. I am very grateful to be on this campus and to have this chance to hear from all of you and answer any and all questions that I know that this is an engaged audience who are interested in the First in the Nation primary, and I also know that there are a lot of remaining questions in these next few days that are being posed to those of us who are asking for your votes. I, for one, know that there are a lot of young people supporting my opponent, and I want you to know, even if you don't support me, I support you. And I want to do everything I can to make sure you have the best opportunities in your future. Because, after all, that's what elections have to be about. What will we do to give more economic opportunity, to make it possible for more people to pursue? We knocked out even inequality or racism, sexism, discrimination against the LGBT community or people with disabilities. How do we make this country what we know it can and should be? And that's what I want to have this conversation with you about. So I'm not going to make a speech. I'm going to answer questions. And I'll answer as many as we have time for. And, I would invite people who are trying to make up your minds about who you will vote for on Tuesday, or people who are supporting Senator Sanders, to please feel not only free, but welcome to ask questions. And I do want to say a special word of thanks to Anthony, because he was the one who planted this idea. And I'm glad to be here with him and with all of you. So with that, let me just say, who wants to start? And I think we've got some microphones that are maybe around somewhere, do we have microphones that can get to people? Yeah, okay, so here's a young man who just stood right up, and let's get him a microphone and start from there.
Secretary Sanders, you've undergone an enormous amount I'm nervous, I'm sorry.
That's all right, I get nervous too. But you just take your time. Go ahead.
You've undergone enormous amounts of scrutiny for controversial topics such as Benghazi and your emails. Now, that also surrounds you with a certain amount of distrust from American people. What do you say to the people that withhold this distrust, and how do you gain their trust?
It's a really fair question, and let me just start with just a little bit of context and a little bit of history, because as Anthony said when he introduced me, I have been in the public life for a number of years. And I brought with me into my husband's presidency a long history of taking on difficult issues, standing up for people who needed a voice, an advocate, a champion. So I am well acquainted with what it takes to stand up against and try to fight to achieve progress against the status quo. So for the last 25 years, since I've been in the national spotlight because of first my husband's presidency and then my 8 years in the Senate, my 4 years as Secretary of State, I know that I am viewed as a direct threat to the forces that call a lot of the shots in this country. When I took on universal health care back in 93 and 94, the drug companies, the insurance companies spent millions of dollars. And look, it's not a stupid strategy. You sow doubts about somebody, you make claims about somebody, you undermine somebody, and even when it is not true, it leaves exactly the impression that you just described. I'm well aware of that. But you see, part of the reason I am running is because I have stood up against these forces. I have been on the front lines against them, and I'm still standing, and they're still trying to bring me down. So I've had all the scrutiny that anybody could ever have in national life. And you look at their various and sundry claims. Let's talk about Benghazi. It was investigated 9 times independently. Republican-led committees in the House, committees in the Senate, an independent board. What did they find? There were mistakes made by people. What did they find? I moved immediately to remedy all of those. What did they find? Nothing beyond that. Now, after testifying for 11 hours, they had to come out and say, we didn't learn anything new, after admitting the whole idea was to bring me down politically. So you see, I have no illusions about how hard progress is because I've been pushing forward on progress for 45 years. And I will keep pushing forward, and I will keep taking on every single one of the adversaries. Let's talk about emails. It just came out, Secretary Powell, Secretary Rice's closest aides use private email. Everybody knew that. But the idea was to somehow turn what I did into something that was out of, that nobody else had ever done. Nobody else had ever, used private email. That's just not true. As Secretary Powell said the other day, what is really quite disturbing about this is looking at the emails, which I asked to be publicly released. I want you to read them. There's some weird things in them, but there's some interesting things. Actually, there's a blog post a woman just put up, said, I was the biggest Hillary hater in the world until I read her emails. And guess what? She's a real person. What a revelation. So on the emails, what is happening is that some agencies are fighting about whether something that was not marked classified when it was sent or received should be retroactively classified. So they're doing it to Secretary Powell. They're doing it to Secretary Rice. Secretary Powell said the other day, this is an absurdity. So yeah, will the Republicans give up on it? Of course not. Because they want you to have these doubts. But let me tell you this. The senators, I just came from a big event in Concord with Cory Booker. Yesterday I was with 4 other senators, including Jean Shaheen. The people who have worked with me, in fact, have worked with us both, are supporting me. And they know me, they know who I am, they know what my values are, they know what I can get done. So I can't stop Republicans, I can't stop hedge fund billionaires from starting a super PAC to run ads against me to influence people to vote for Senator Sanders. Now ask yourself, why would they spend $6 million trying to get people to vote against me? Why would Karl Rove be running ads to get Democrats to vote against me? Because they know I don't give in, I don't give up, I've been in the arena, and I am prepared to make sure they do not ever wreck our economy again. So just think about what's really at stake. Let's see. Okay, here's a question. It looks like it was well written out here. You want to stand up and read it? Okay.
What explanation do you have for the 90% of Americans who are in favor of labeling GMO food products? If the votes of Congress aren't bought and paid for by major food corporations, as you claim, why does this request by such a vast majority of the population keep hitting a brick wall?
Well, first of all, I do favor labeling GMOs. I do. I favor what the Obama administration has proposed because I think it's the best way to get to the outcome we are seeking. And what they propose is voluntary labeling and a lot more research and a lot more consumer information so that people can make their own decisions. I think that is where we are, because if we look at the whole issue about GMOs, about nutrition, we are woefully under-researching. And we need to do a whole lot more about what really is going on. Because let me take this example. There are a lot of products that have been hybridized, have been affected by genetic changes. One of the reasons why we have some hope of helping Africa feed itself is because we are developing drought-resistant seeds. Technically, those are GMOs. So we've got to be smart about this. So I am all in favor. I want to see barcodes. I want to see more information. I want consumers to send as clear a message in the marketplace as possible. And if, as you claim, 90% of people don't want to do it, then 90% of consumers won't buy it, and we will not have to have this issue. So let's make it information available to consumers to make the best decisions, and let's try to do more research so we actually know what it is we have to worry about and what we don't have to worry about, and what the costs and benefits are, particularly for trying to grow crops in drought areas, which are becoming, because of climate change, much more common. So that's how I would handle it. Yes, someone right here.
My name is Cruz, and I'm a grad student here. My question to you specifically is more philosophical on where you stand on certain things. So currently we have a really huge climate going on with police brutality and the Black Lives Matter movement. So my question to you is, where do you specifically stand on this movement as far as its support, and what sort of leverage can you offer the country and safety net for what we can seek to have from your presidency on sort of not censoring our police departments, but allowing others to sort of survive and be here and exist and not go that?
Well, I support what the Black Lives Movement has done and what it has meant. And I think that we need a lot more organized effort to make sure we follow through on the plans for reform. The first speech, the very first speech I gave in this campaign in New York City back in, I think, late March, early April, was about criminal justice reform and ending the era of mass incarceration. And since then, I have had a number of very important and frankly emotional meetings with people about this. I do put it in a larger context because it's not just police violence that is ending the lives of young people. Homicide is the leading cause of death for young African American men. And it's, yes, the well-publicized, horrible cases of police killings, and it is civilian killings, gang killings, random killings. You know, a few months ago I met in Chicago with the mothers of a lot of the young men and women who have been killed. Some by police, some by totally random events, like this incredible young woman, India Palestine from Chicago, who came back a week after performing at President Obama's second inauguration. She's across the street from her school in a park with some of her friends just hanging out. A random gunshot takes her life. You know, I spent a lot of time talking to Trayvon Martin's mother. You know, it's just the most emotionally wrenching experience to sit around a table and listen to mothers and have them show me pictures of their children. So here's what we have to do, and I want you to think about this as two halves of trying to solve this terrible problem. The first is we must have more accountability for police action. We must have independent accountability, whether it's an attorney general or a special board, but we cannot let the sense that there is no accountability to continue. It's wrong. If somebody takes a life and they're wearing a uniform and they're sworn to protect the community, then it has to be investigated, it has to be justified, or there have to be action taken. There's more we have to do. We have to do more retraining, we have to do more building of relationships between communities and the police. We did that for a period of time, then it kind of fell off. We've got to reinvigorate it. And we have to have the best standards for police and make sure that they are well equipped and ready to exercise judgment that doesn't immediately lead to grabbing their gun. So I say that, go to my website, Hillaryclinton.com, and you can see, you know, all of the proposals that we have been putting out there in consultation with a lot of very experienced people. I support President Obama's policing commission. I think it's a good start, and I want to build on that. And you know, I've met with some of those who were on it, and I think that they give us a good platform going forward. But we also have to help protect innocent people in their communities. And that's why I'm so adamant about taking on the gun lobby and getting us toward common sense gun safety measures. You know, maybe they're not going to save every life. That's what the gun lobby always says. You know, when I'm out there talking about, say, comprehensive background checks, close the online loophole, close the gun show loophole, close what's called the Charleston loophole, because under the Brady Bill, the killer in Charleston was able to get a gun he should not have gotten because the law permits him to get it after 3 business days, even though the investigation into his background was not complete. So he got that gun, and he went to Mother Emanuel, And he went into that Bible study, and he sat with those people for an hour as they read scripture and talked about it, and then he pulled out that gun and he murdered 9 of them. So we've got to do more to get guns out of the hands of the haters, of the mentally dangerously ill. We've got to do more. We lose 33,000 people a year to guns. Homicides, suicides, and tragic preventable accidents. Toddlers finding loaded guns under the bed or in the closet. So we got to concentrate on reforming police. We've got to hold police accountable. We've got to get more community oversight and input into how policing works. But we got to deal with violence wherever it is and whoever it stalks. You know, it wasn't a police officer who killed Trayvon Martin, but his mother never talked to him again. So we've got to go after this violence problem wherever it sticks up its brutal or ugly head. And that's going to be one of my highest priorities. You know, there are a lot of things the president must do, and one of them is to keep the American people safe. And that is not just keeping them safe from terrorists over there and over here. That's keeping them safe in their neighborhoods. Letting them feel like they can walk down the street, that they can go to the park, that they, can live a normal life like Adia Pendleton was doing, and not have to worry that that would be the last day of their life. So I am absolutely committed to doing everything I can to try to deal with the epidemic of gun violence we have, no matter where it comes from. Okay.
Why do you want to be the president?
The number one reason I want to be the president is to try to make sure every little girl and boy in America gets a chance to have the best possible life. When I got out of law school, I went to work for something called the Children's Defense Fund. And I learned about it because I read an article in Time magazine about this amazing woman who had gone to the law school I went to. I went to Yale Law School, and her name was Mary Wright Edelman, and she had graduated first from Spelman, then from Yale. And she was the first African-American woman to be acknowledged as having passed the Mississippi bar. She was one of Dr. King's, principal advocates and advisors. And I was just at the law school one day. I looked up on a bulletin board. We used to have those things. Bulletin boards that came into the paper and you look at them. And it said she was going to be at Yale, and she was going to be talking. So I went to hear her talk, and I was just transfixed. So I went up to her afterwards and I said, I want to work for you this summer. She was starting the Children's Defense Fund. She said, well, I don't have any money to pay you. I said, well, if I could figure out how to get myself paid, can I work for you? Sure. So I got something called the Law Student Civil Rights Research Council grant, went to work there, and never looked back. And it really is the core of what I've done, working to get juveniles out of adult jails in South Carolina, going undercover to Alabama to try to get information about people setting up white segregated academies to avoid court orders, going door to door in New Bedford, Massachusetts, finding kids with disabilities to make the case they should be in school, not left at home, and so much of the other work in advocacy. And so for me, when I think about this election, and I'm certainly looking at all of you and this young lady right there, as my husband likes to say, you have a lot more tomorrows than yesterdays. And I want to, as somebody who probably has fewer tomorrows than yesterdays, to spend every tomorrow doing what I can to help every child live up to his or her potential. And that means I want to tackle it all. Nothing is off limits. And I want to make a point about this because I really do respect the very strong passion that Senator Sanders brings to his critique of the economy and to his critique of Wall Street. I happen to share it. I actually called them out early before the 08 crash. I think I have the tougher plan, but that's not my point. My point is this. That's not the only problem we have in America. We got to go after the greed. We've got to go after the inequality. But we also have to go after all the barriers that are holding people back. We just talked about one. walking or driving while black. That is a barrier to you being able to do whatever you choose to do, and all the other young people over here. Sexism, it still exists. I certainly know that, having the scars to show for it. I don't want any girl, I don't want any woman held back because of gender. LGBT discrimination, we've made an enormous amount of progress, but let's not kid ourselves. You can get married on Saturday and get fired on Monday. We've got to do everything possible to open up the doors of equality and opportunity for all in the LGBT community. People with disabilities, out of sight, out of mind. You know, I meet folks who come to my events, they stand up and they talk to me that they're an adult with autism, or they're in a wheelchair, and they want to work, they want to contribute. What are we going to do? And then all these other barriers. I was canvassing in Manchester this morning, and a young man came up and said he was supporting me, and I asked him why. He said, because you started talking about addiction, and you kept talking about it. I said, well, do you have a personal experience? He said, yeah. When he was a senior in high school, he was an athlete, had a bad accident, had to have surgery, got a lot of painkillers, a lot of opioids. And he said, I just got addicted. He said, and then, you know, when they discharged me, it was cheaper to get heroin. He said, you know, he said, I've been sober 2.5 years now, but this is a constant problem for my friends and for people that I know, and it's a real epidemic here in New Hampshire. So there's a lot that we have to tackle. And when I think about some of the battles that I've been involved in, standing up for Planned Parenthood, standing up for a woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions, that's ideological. That's not economic. That's ideological. People who disagree fundamentally with women's autonomy and independence, who want to shut it down. So I have a large view of what we have to do to tackle the barriers so that a young girl like her can feel that she's going to have a much clearer shot at being whoever she chooses to be and going as far as her hard work and talent will take. Okay. I want to get a little further back, but I just take people who I can see close by. I'll come back to you, but I don't want people standing up. Do you have a microphone that can get to this lady right there? There's a lady right there. Thanks.
First, I'd like to say that I actually worked for you 8 years ago when you were in the primary fight against Barack Obama.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I'd like to go back to your first question,
Right.
which was what do you do to persuade people who have some doubts left?
Right.
And my concern is that your answer that nothing new is found in the God's parents continues to give me some doubts, because what seemed to have come out was that you were pushing the video paradigm when you were writing an email to your daughter that said the opposite. And the other doubt, so I'd like you to address that, in addition to why you felt because you destroyed so many emails that maybe had nothing to do, that much to do with yoga. Everybody knows you can't write 30,000 messages for yoga instructors. The other thing is, about I know I've heard that some have can't answer about previous secretaries of state using private emails. I understand that. I'm guessing that the president probably. Let me finish. But they didn't have a private server. So these are the things that are lingering.
Let me answer.
I'd like to make this
No. Look, I said I'm here to answer any questions, and I appreciate you asking any and any follow-up questions. And let me take them one by one, best that I can, because I want you to know what the facts are. So, number one, and you can go back and you can look at my testimony, and you can look at all the independent reports. And I'll just give you a brief overview. I'm not going to take you 11 hours to it. Before we were attacked in Benghazi, our embassy in Cairo was attacked, but it's a fortified, strong building with all kinds of barriers. It was attacked because of the video. That was absolutely true. When Benghazi happened, it was the fog of war. There was no clear understanding, and there wasn't for many, many days. But the first claim of responsibility for Benghazi came from a group, a terrorist group, that claimed responsibility, and after that happened, that's when I communicated with my daughter. That it looks like, well, clearly there was an attack. We called it, President Obama and I called it a terrorist attack. He said it was an attack by terrorists. And so, between the time I told my daughter that and the next day, that group withdrew their claim of responsibility. This was happening in real time. New information, the intelligence community trying to keep track of it. All during that week, we had facilities under attack from Tunisia to India over the video. I had called in extra help from the Tunisian government to try to break up the attack on our embassy in Tunisia over the video. When we finally arrested one of the ringleaders of the attack in Benghazi, he said that one of the reasons they did the attack was the video. Now, I have to tell you, I know this is a meme. I know this is a constant claim by some in the media, some on the right, some in the Republican Party. But all you have to do is look at the timeline. Did the video play a part? It certainly played a part in all the other attacks we were under. Did the ringleader who we arrested and now have in this country for trial say it played a part? He did. Were they terrorists? Yes, they were. Those are not in contradiction. And I don't understand the constant effort by some, particularly in the press, to sort of parse this when the people on the ground, the people that we were trying to get information from, were working as hard as they could to get the best possible understanding of what was going on. And I would imagine that even if you were to make a list of who said what and who said what, you would find there were people motivated to be terrorists attacking, there were people motivated by the video or what they heard about what was going on in Cairo. At the end of the day, it was a terrorist attack. People who attacked our facility and then went on to attack the CIA annex. That is, you know, I wish I could give you an absolute answer. Yes, it was. No, it wasn't. But that would not be true. Trying to sort all that out is what has taken a long time, and what independent observers and experts have said makes it difficult because there were a lot of strains at work. Some online, some being said to people, some after the fact. So I think that on Benghazi particularly, it's important to put this in context. Why is this being used as a great political issue? I really regret it is. You know, in 1983 and 1984, we lost 258 Marines. Our embassy was attacked in Beirut. Nobody made it a political issue. We said, okay, this is a horrible thing. What are we going to do? President Reagan, Speaker O'Neill, members of the Congress. What are we going to do? And we learned, okay, we need to do better at protecting ourselves and our facilities. The end of my husband's administration, Al-Qaeda attacked 2 of our embassies, one in Tanzania, one in Kenya. 12 Americans were killed and hundreds of Kenyans and Tanzanians were killed. Secretary Albright was the Secretary of State, and she made a very courageous decision. She said, I'm going to have an independent investigation. I'm going to make it public. She did. First time ever. It wasn't politicized. People said, oh my gosh, we didn't have the barrier back far enough. The truck bomb got too close. We were attacked on 9/11 on our own land. We had an investigation. We had hearings. It was horrible. People pointed fingers, but at the end of the day, they said, we got to pull together. We've got to make sure this never happens again. The loss of any American is a tragedy, whether they are in uniform or they are civilian. So when Benghazi happened, I immediately did what Secretary Albright said. Independent investigation, it will be made public, and it was. There's more information about this than you will find in most other kinds of events. And I'm glad, because I want Americans to look at it, to judge it, to figure out what we do. And I regret that 4 brave Americans whose lives were lost serving our country have been put in the middle of what is a very political effort. And I just think it's wrong. And I don't think we should do it.
My question is, I graduated in 3 months, and so I'm going to the Navy. So my question for you is, as I possibly lost, what would you do to ensure that the United States military remains the greatest fighting force the nation's ever seen?
First of all, congratulations. I'm glad you're thinking about a career in the Navy. I'm really impressed by that. I served on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and I have a great sense of obligation to make sure that the men and women in uniform and their families, as well as our veterans, are given the support that they need in every phase of their career and life going forward. And I do think we've got some work to do to make sure that we keep our defense as strong as it must be. And we have to look at how we modernize various aspects of it. So my understanding is, right now in the Defense Department, there's a lot of work underway to try to figure out, okay, what kind of Navy do we need in, let's say, 2040, 2050? What kind of Air Force, Army, Marines, you name it. And I think the answers are going to have to be really clear about what it is we think of as our major threats and how we intend to protect against them. So this is a long subject. Let's take one point. We have an ongoing dispute with the Chinese over the South China Sea. It really became quite open when I was Secretary of State, because the Chinese began to claim that they had rights to the South China Sea, including territories like reefs and atolls and islands that were close to or even in territorial waters belonging to other nations. 40% of the world's trade goes through the South China Sea. We have a direct interest in making sure lines of commerce are kept open. The Chinese are building what's called the Blue Water Navy. They got their first aircraft carrier. They're going to be adding to it. And they are building installations, military installations, on a lot of these, literally, rocks to have, sites throughout the South China Sea. And they're building ports along southern Asian countries, from Bangladesh to Sri Lanka, Pakistan. A lot of the people in the neighborhood are worried about that. They're worried that the Chinese will have too much power over what happens on the South China Sea. What kind of Navy do we need to reassure our friends and our allies, because we have treaty allies in, like the Philippines, in that area? How do we support countries that are worried, like Vietnam, about what that means for their economic development? That's the kind of analysis will have to be done to determine what kind of Navy do we need. Are you going to be an officer on a destroyer or an aircraft carrier, or are you going to be, looking at cyber warfare that might affect our ability to project power? We have to ask a lot of new questions. It's not just the same old, line them up, put the money in, have the ships, the equipment, the personnel. We've got to be smart about how we do this strategically. And I'm absolutely committed to being a president who is a commander-in-chief, who not only worries about this, but helps work so that we get the right answers. Because you make a decision about military readiness or investment, and you don't often see the result for 10 years. So it's not something that you can immediately turn and go back from. You've got to understand the world that we're going to be facing. And I think that you will be part of helping us figure that out. The current size, I think that has to be tied to strategy. You see, I think it's a mistake to say, here's the current size, now let's figure out the strategy. And then eventually pursue the strategy. So that's where I'm at. Okay, the young lady in the red cap. Yes, you. Right, yes.
How excited you are.
Hi, I actually go to Wellesley College.
Yay!
What is your plan to help parents and students with college loan debt and interest rates?
Well, I know that is on everybody's mind, both students and parents, and I have a plan for debt-free tuition, and also providing more financial help for fees and expenses, because lots of times that can be a real impediment for a lot of young people. I think it's important that we do everything we possibly can to open the doors again to college, because it is clear that too many families are feeling shut out, left behind. I want free community college, so at least you get 2 free years that you can then build on, either get skills and credentials or use it as the jumping off point to go into 4-year programs. I also believe we've got to immediately move to refinance student debt. There's about $1.2 trillion in student debt. 40 million Americans have it. And I want to refinance to the lowest possible rate, and I want to move people, as many as I can, out of any interest rate bearing obligation. How many of you have student debt, or ever have? Yeah, I do too. Any of you know what your interest rate is on the debt that you have? What's your interest rate?
8%.
8%. Anybody higher than 8%? 11.
Oh my gosh.
This is crazy, my friends. We haven't even had interest rates for a decade. And you've got people right here in this room paying 8 and 11%. It is wrong. And we've got to stop it. And the only way to stop it is to refinance it completely, move people into income contingency repayment programs. We started that when my husband was president. President Obama has continued it. The reason Bill started is because he and I had those kinds of plans. You know, we got out of law school with debt, but we were in one of these plans where we paid it back as a percentage of our income. So when I went to work for the Children's Defense Fund, making, I don't know, $14,000 a year or something, I wasn't at an 8 or 11% interest rate. I paid 10% of my income. And that was it. And I had no interest on top of it. So the money I borrowed was all principal. That's what I want to get back to. So get the debt down that people already have, and then get on a new path so that, number one, you don't have to take on as much debt, because it will be debt-free. But number two, if you take on debt, you will know exactly what you owe. And I think the federal government should not be making money off of lending money to students. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's right. I am absolutely appalled at this company, Navient, which is the loan processing company now. Their behavior is outrageous. And I know that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Department of Education are looking at them. But they are misleading people. They have done some really terrible things to active duty servicemen getting out, getting into college. They have misled them. So I want to take out the middlemen as much as I can. I want a big revolving loan fund. You know, you borrow, you pay it back, and somebody behind you gets to borrow and pay it back. And I want to triple national service jobs. I want to go to 250,000 national service jobs, AmeriCorps and other jobs, so that if you do 2 years of national service and you commit to a year of public service professions like teaching, like nursing, law enforcement, whatever it might be, you will be able to go to college for practically nothing. We're going to double the education grant. I talk a lot about what I want to do for the economy. I want to grow the economy, I want a fair economy, I want long-term growth. This debt problem is holding back our economy. It's not just an individual problem. It is suppressing the abilities, the opportunities that young people have. Start a business, take a different job, People are strangled by these interest rates and by the harassment that comes from a company like Navient. So we're going to just start all over again. We're going to get the rates down. We're going to save thousands of dollars. We're going to have a new system. And it's going to be a lot fairer, and it's not going to be the burdensome one that we have today. So I feel passionately about this. It's wrong, and we're not going to let it stand. White and black coat? Yeah. Yeah, this lady right here? Yeah. Here comes the microphone somewhere. There, I'll go. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Secretary Clinton. Can you just explain for us how you understand the momentum towards Bernie at the moment?
Well, let me start by saying I am really happy to see so many young people involved in the political process. I really am. I think that the first time I came to New Hampshire, it was in 1968. I came up with a bunch of my friends from Wellesley to campaign for Eugene McCarthy to end the war in Vietnam. So I am someone who both believes in and supports getting more young people into the political process. And I want to have automatic voter registration when you turn 18. So you're in it, you're a voter, and hopefully can be persuaded to be more active. And look, I said at the beginning, I know that Senator Sanders has a very big base of young voters. And they're not supporting me. And I just want any of you and others that you know to know that I'm supporting you. This is not an either or. I'm going to do everything I can to fix these problems like debt from college and making it affordable in the first place and, getting the kinds of jobs and opportunities back into our economy. And it will primarily benefit young people, and that's the way it should be. So I can't speak for everybody who supports Senator Sanders. I know some supporters have come to my events and have talked to me, and I'll tell you what they say to me. I don't know how representative it is. In one of the events I did in Iowa, a young man said, I'm supporting Senator Sanders, but I want to come hear you speak. I said, well, I'll tell you why you are, because he's going to give me free college. And I said, I'm going to give you debt-free college, but I think free college would be a mistake. And I'll be honest with you, I do. Because if all you do is raise $750 billion for the federal government to pay for everybody to have free college, including Donald Trump's kids, you will never get the costs down. There will be no incentive for state governments to get out of building prisons and start building colleges again. You will never have the kind of compact that we need so that the young people, middle class, upper middle class, to poor kids, are first in line. I think if you have the means to pay for your child to go to college, you should pay for your child to go to college. So look, people want to support free college, even though I think it would lead to an explosion of cost. That's a choice. And I think it's important to look at, one of the other points that a group of young people supporting Bernie told me. They said, they want single-payer health care, they want free health care. I said, I've been fighting for universal health care coverage for all these years. I'm really proud that we finally got it done under President Obama with the Affordable Care Act. They are at 90% coverage. And I have a very specific set of objectives about how we get the costs down, how we get the remaining 10% of Americans covered, how we deal with the high cost of prescription drugs. I am absolutely adamant against the Republicans' continuing efforts to repeal it. And we have to make sure they never get to do that. But I also disagree with not the goal. Senator Sanders and I have the same goal, universal health care coverage, but with the program that he has presented, which a lot of progressive health economists have analyzed and said it would cost $1 trillion more than has been suggested, that it would cause an enormous amount of disruption. It would plunge our country back into a very contentious debate about health care. And the people that I meet, that I hear from, can't wait for that, assuming it could ever happen. And that, to me, is unlikely, given the current makeup of people's health care, because you would say to 170 million Americans who get private insurance through their employers, we think we've got a better idea. You're going to have to give up what you got in order to get there. I tried that. I was in those rooms making those arguments. I also supported a public option, give people the option to find the only single-payer system we have, namely Medicare. Couldn't even get that through a Democratic Congress. So I have this view. I don't think people can wait, and they sure can't bear to go back to where the Republicans want to take us, where the insurance companies call all the shots. You have a pre-existing condition, you're out of luck. If you're under 26, you're not on your parents' policy. If you're a woman, you pay more than men for your health insurance. You have a lifetime cap, no matter how sick you are. I don't think people can go back there and feel that they have any sense of security, and I won't do that. So I will defend the Affordable Care Act, and I don't think that we have any other path forward that will actually get the results we want. So I'm going to keep fighting for literally the millions of people who are better off because of it, and make sure we fix those challenges with it, but I'm not going to let it be repealed or replaced, because I don't think that would be a better outcome. So that's that.
I'd like to stick with the debt question, except I'd like to look at a more national level. We have closer to $19 trillion than $18 trillion in national debt, and I would like to hear your thoughts on addressing that.
You know, how many of you are concerned about the national debt? Okay. How many of you aren't? Okay. You know, here's where I come from, and you know, forgive me, I have a really strong set of feelings about this. The end of my husband's administration, we had a balanced budget and a surplus. We've seen the creation of 23 million new jobs. Incomes went up for everybody, not just those at the top. We were on a solid path. There have been bumps on the road, of course, but we were on a solid path to really dealing with our debt. Now, in came a Republican president, and you know, you got to give them credit. They are consistently wrong, but consistent. So back we went to trickle-down economics, slash taxes on the wealthy, get out of the way of corporations, get out of the way of the mortgage market, and wage two wars without raising a penny to pay for either one of them. The first time in American history that had ever happened. And we saw the result. The Great Recession of 2008, President Obama coming in, inheriting this horrible financial crisis. We were losing 800,000 jobs a month. 9 million people lost their jobs, 5 million homes were lost, $13 trillion in family wealth wiped out. And President Obama had to play the hand he was dealt. And I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for getting us out of the big ditch that we were dropped in before he even became president. And I don't think that time of day on this. They're saying the very same thing right here in New Hampshire. They love to rail about government spending. They are the biggest spenders there ever were. Irresponsible, and their economic policies of trickle-down economics is a recipe for greater inequality. And then when they have the gall to say, as I've heard them say, in criticizing President Obama, this is the slowest recovery in American history. Yeah, well, it was the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, and they have the gall, having gotten us into that mess, to complain that we're not getting out fast enough. Well, we're down now below 5% unemployment. We have problems in the economy. We have work to do. But it's been a pretty great accomplishment for the president and his team to get us to where we are today. We do have to start paying attention to the debt. But here's the problem. The Republicans don't want to pay for anything. They are, they'd be happy to raise the defense budget but not pay for it a bit. They are unwilling to be responsible actors, except when they want to cut everything that will give us a better future. They would zero out clean, renewable energy. They would zero out early childhood education. they would certainly be more than happy to do what they could to prevent us from having an agenda that I think would make us safer, richer, more prosperous in the future. So yeah, we do have to pay attention to it. It's hard being responsible with a group of elected officials who wouldn't even pay in a sensible way for the infrastructure that we need to build. So I'm going to do the best job I can to make the investments we need. That's another one of the reasons why what I have set forth, all of my investments in everything, clean energy, more manufacturing help, more infrastructure, early childhood, paid family leave, fixing the Affordable Care Act. I would spend about $100 billion in new spending a year, and I tell you exactly how I would pay for it. So I think it's important that those of you who are trying to make this decision by Tuesday really look at whether the numbers add up, because it matters. We've got to make sure that maybe we can't get back to where we were in 2000, unfortunately, but at least we can get back to putting some balance and make some of the necessary trade-offs that are called for. But it is an issue, and we do have to address it, but we also have to make investments for the future, so that's what the balance has to be as we try to work with the Congress and get something done. Okay, let's see over here. Oh, okay, well, I've got to ask my introducer here.
Thank you again for coming. So how much further than President Obama would you go on immigration and its laws staying within the laws?
I would go as far as I could go. I fully support the President's executive actions on immigration. I think they are well-founded in the law and precedent. I hope the Supreme Court agrees, because they've taken this case out of Texas that stopped action on the President's immigration orders. I want to go as far as I can, and you're right to ask it that way, Anthony, under the law, obviously. I think the President has, and if there's any more room for me to do that, once we find out what the Supreme Court decides, I will. But I also want to shut down family detention centers. I want to shut down private prisons. I want to deport criminals, not hardworking family members. I don't agree with the raise. I want to end the raise. I don't think we need to do that. And I want to, in this campaign, because whoever the Republicans nominate has already gotten on record as being against immigration and have said some ridiculous things. Round up 11, 12 million people, deport them all. Fine, you want troops stationed in every town in America? You want American military forces to be going into houses and business places? Because there's no other way that this would be done. This is just a cruel, political, partisan fantasy. And it needs to be called out for exactly what it is. And so we need to work hard. It will be one of my earliest priorities in the first year to try to get comprehensive immigration reform. And if we are successful, as I hope we will be, in taking back the Senate and in standing up and winning in the presidential election and bringing more Democrats up and down the line into office, maybe finally the Republicans will conclude they need to join us in comprehensive immigration reform and quit using it as a partisan political football. So that's what I'm hoping, and that's what I will try to do. So, oh my goodness, so many hands. Well, I got to go to the man with the 8% interest rate. Burying your soul like that.
Madam Secretary, I'm a political science professor here, so thank you so much for coming to Lehman College. There seems to be a lot of frustration and anger among voters this cycle in particular. So my first question is, how would you work to sort of heal that anger and assuage that frustration? And second, this is really important to me, will you commit when you're elected President of the United States to keep New Hampshire first in the nation?
Well, if I were a political science professor here at this beautiful college, I would certainly know the answer to that. But as someone who really believes in this primary process, the answer is yes. I think it's the best sorting out process that I know of, and I've had the greatest experiences here in New Hampshire going back to 1992. So I sure wouldn't want to do anything to see it in any way affected, other than to keep it going and get this kind of interest and involvement of people. So tell me about your first question. What's behind your first question?
Well, I look at the success of someone like Donald Trump. I would argue that this has been one, on the Republican side in particular, the least focuses on issues. It's all about personality, it's a lot about anger and saying things that kind of get people fired up without any real solutions. I think on the other side, you all had a lot of substance in your debates. But my concern about Senator Sanders is he appeals to people's hearts. What I like about you is you have a lot of experience dealing with real world issues. You said you've been in the arena, you got the scars to prove it. I have followed you over the years, and I can attest to that. We need real world solutions. We live in a very dangerous world, and we need somebody who understands that. And it concerns me when folks talk in generalities, not without specifics.
Well, thank you for that. I'd love to get feedback from any of you, because like the professor, obviously, I see the anger, I see the frustration, I share it. You know, the system is not working the way it should. There is too much power and money and influence at the top. There is no argument with that diagnosis. It's absolutely true. The question is, what do we do about it? How do we make progress together? And at the end of the anger and the venting and the frustration, there has to be a strategy to go after what it is people are so worried about, so upset about, and show that we can make progress. The Republicans stoke that anger in large measure because the professor's absolutely right. They don't offer alternatives. Their whole plan is anger. Anger, scapegoating, finger pointing. You know, blame immigrants, blame Muslims, blame somebody for whatever ails you. That's their theory. And unfortunately, a lot of people are hurting in our country. There are a lot of people who are discouraged or disillusioned or feeling like it's not working for them anymore. And they're looking for answers. And somebody running for president who stands up and says, I know who you can blame. You know, blame those Mexican immigrants. Blame those Muslims. Well, it's an explanation, and people want to grab onto it. It is so dangerous. It is not just offensive, it's dangerous. The last thing we need is more vitriol, more divisiveness, more anger in our political system. Yeah, be angry and then say, what am I going to do to make it work? What am I going to do to make a difference? And I feel so strongly about this because I want people to have better lives. I don't want people to be used as political chess pieces where basically the anger is stoked and you can vent and then we'll come up with some more anger or we'll tell some more lies or we'll make up some more stories. That's not how we became the country we are. And we cannot afford to go down this path. We are the best problem solvers in the world. Now, we set up a democracy that made it hard to solve problems. We got separation of powers, we've got 3 branches of government, but the founders knew exactly what they were doing. You'll go back and read the Federalist Papers. Read about the debates. They knew you had to cool off the passions of people in order to figure out what's the best way forward. And I know that it's maybe not the most appealing or charismatic message to say, hey guys, be angry and then let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. Be frustrated by what's not working and then help come solve it. But that's the only way we've ever made progress in America. And it is the way we will make progress again. There's so much we can do if people believe again that we can. And I am absolutely committed to that. You know, I was with Senator Cory Booker, who was campaigning for me, as I said in Concord earlier. And he's one of the most eloquent speakers anywhere. He's a great guy. And he was talking about the arc of human history in America, about how many setbacks we've had. You know, he talked about George Washington being driven out of New York into New Jersey by the British, and what a disaster it appeared to be, and how much will and grit had to go into kind of getting back up. And he talked in a very, incredibly wonderful way about all of the progress that has been made. Are we what we need to be? No. Have we fulfilled our own values and ideals? No. But are we still on the path if we don't get knocked off by demagogues who want us to forget what we can do together, who want us to retreat into anger and isolation, who want us to hang out just with people like ourselves who we already agree with, instead of coming together in community to try to answer the call to service and solve the problems that await? That's what I worry about. And I worry about it in this election. Anger is a powerful emotion, but it is not a plan. And we've got to figure out how we're going to pick up the opportunity given to this generation and go even further than you dreamed possible today. I want to be the president who gets up every single day, not just thinking about what I'm going to do, but what all of you are going to do. Because that's what will make the difference. Community by community, fixing those relations with the police officers, reaching out and helping kids who are addicted actually finally get treatment and recovery, working to help bring down the cost of prescription drugs that have skyrocketed out of reach so that families grab my hands on rope lines or in restaurants like this morning and say, I don't know what I'm going to do, I can't afford the drugs I need. For every person we figure out how to help by solving that person's problem, we will help millions more. And at the end of the day, here's how I want you to judge me. Is our country better off when I end than when I started? Are individuals better off? Because if we could get to that point, we can actually be back in the future business again. Not pointing fingers, but joining hands and making a difference for the country that has given so many of us so much. Okay, let's see. I don't want to leave people out. I know sitting in the front, I'll be back. Yes, right there. Here I come. You're welcome.
Secretary Clinton, I've been watching you since 1988, and I have to tell you that I am in awe of your tenacity, your ability to weather the most incredible storms, and still keep your eye on the prize. And hopefully, I'm there for you, and I hope you succeed. I wanted to address two things. One, particularly from the professor and the frustration that everyone feels, and that is a function of. I think most people feel that in the government we've lost our voice. No one's listening to us. And some of that's a function of Citizens United. It's a function of lobbyists. And I'm wondering if you could address those issues and how are they repealable? Are they fixable?
I think you're absolutely right. Look, I think the Supreme Court, this current Supreme Court, has made a series of decisions that disempower Americans, that create new and almost unlimited opportunities for the rich and powerful to influence our elections. And here's what I think. The next president will get maybe 2 or 3 Supreme Court appointments. And I will certainly look for people to appoint who understand the very serious damage that some of these decisions like Citizens United is doing to our country. To try to revisit that, to try to reverse that, but I will also lead an effort for a constitutional amendment if that is the only way we can get control back of our campaign finances. Right now, we have all this unaccountable money, dark money, and the real big pools of money that I worry the most about are these so-called 501c4 funds. There are super PACs, that's one thing. Obviously that has to be dealt with. But then there's this, in my view, absolutely corrosive practice of creating these big funds And you don't even have to disclose who's putting money into them. You know, back in the 2014 election where Democrats really took a lot of defeats, we don't even know who a third of the donors to those funds were. Citizens United blew open the door. They didn't just open it. They practically knocked the side off the house. So we've got to, and if it takes a constitutional amendment, we must try to rein that in. I want to get back to public financing, campaign financing. You know, I think that's the best way for us to do that. And if you saw the debate the other night, you know, both Senator Sanders and I are in an impossible position. Senator Sanders was asked, well, if you believe in campaign financing, public financing, why don't you get into the presidential system and abide by those rules? Absolutely doesn't work anymore. It's antiquated, and we can't compete against the Republicans and the Koch brothers and Karl Rove and all the other players if we were to do that. I don't disagree with what he said. Therefore, we got to get rid of Citizens United so that we can construct a system that would actually work. And that is what I pledged you to do. Now, with respect to lobbies, you know, lobbies have been around since the beginning of our republic, but now they're out of control. There are too many, they collect too much money, and here's what's really dangerous about lobbies. It's not just the influence they peddle, it's the way they peddle the influence. If you're a lobbyist in Washington, no matter who you're lobbying for, you've got to keep the people you are representing upset and angry and worried that something's going to be done to them so you can keep collecting money to try to prevent the very thing you are worrying them about from happening. The NRA is the master at this. Oh my gosh, background checks. Oh my gosh, you know, they'll come for your guns. Oh, they want to put terrorists on the no-fly list, on the prohibited list for guns. Next thing you know, black helicopter will be in your yard. I mean, they are masters at this kind of fear-mongering. But other lobbyists are as well. They are always out there trying to get the people they represent in a kind of red lather of anxiety so they can get more money into their coffers. We've got to break that somehow. And I think, you know, maybe social media, maybe a concerted effort to really call these people out all the time, get some social pressure on them, get people to know their names. You know, the Daily News, some of you might be from New York, the Daily News has been going after LaPierre, the guy at the head of the NRA, for the last couple of months, calling him Jihadi Wayne, because he won't agree to put the no-fly list people on the prohibited list for buying guns. We've got to try new tactics, we've got to go after them, and we have to have tougher laws. So all of that is part of what I know needs to be done, and we'll work on it. Okay, here you are.
So this might be difficult to answer, but I read up on most articles and blogs. I'm sorry. So I read up on most articles and blogs and found that some citizens and voters consider that the Hillaryclinton that they see on TV seems like really drilled and rehearsed. What do you have to say for commentators that might call you quote-unquote bored and relaxed positivity?
You know, I've heard that and I've seen that, and could you hear a question? No. Yeah. You know, I can only say this. First of all, President Obama said the other day, and I really appreciate him saying this, he said he knew that he and I were like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. I had to do everything he did except backwards in high heels after spending time getting my hair and makeup done. I really understand that there's a much greater burden on women running for political office. I wish it weren't the case, it still is. That's true for women in a lot of other high positions, but when you're running for political office, particularly when you're running for president, there is still a huge double standard. And I was reading a blog post that a friend of mine sent me, and she was talking about a young friend of hers who said, you know, one of the reasons he really liked Senator Sanders is because his hair was a mess and he yelled a lot and he thought that was just great. And I'm thinking to myself, as my friend said, boy, that would really work for any woman we know. So the fact is, I do have a somewhat narrower path that I tried to walk. So, and I do think, and I think you're right about this, I do think sometimes, it comes across as a little more restrained, a little more careful, and I'm sure that's true, which is why I love doing sessions like this. But I've got to be aware of the fact that I'm trying to be the first woman president of the United States of America, and there hasn't been one before. And so people don't have, an image. We've had 44 presidents, men, white until President Obama, and now here I come and I say, I want to be your president, your commander-in-chief. And there's just a lot of processing that people are doing in their heads. I can see it in your eyes. I know that. And it's so fascinating to me. I was at a restaurant this morning in Manchester, and a woman said, "You look so much better in person." Well, I take it as a compliment, but most people will never see me in person, so I just gotta live with that. And you gotta laugh about it, And it's not just about me. It's about young women of all ages, the expectations that are put upon you, and how you deal with them, and how you find your true voice, and how you stand up for yourself, and who you become. Of course, it's important to listen to what others say, and if it's useful, to take it on board. But don't take criticism personally. Take it seriously, because maybe you'll learn something that you wouldn't learn from a friend. But don't take it personally, because a lot of the times, and look, I've been in this arena, a lot of the times people want to just get in your head. They want to knock you down. They want to push you out of the way. I know that. And so part of what I have to do is be my best self, present the best way I know how. I am who I am. I can't do some kind of, personality transformation. I'm not as tall as my husband or President Obama, so, lots of times you can't see me in the crowd. I'm here, waving away. So I have to be true to myself. And, when I ran for the Senate in 2000 in New York, people said I would never win, it wasn't going to happen. And I just did events like this all over, talked to thousands of people. And I did win. And then when I ran again in 6 years, I won with an even bigger percentage. And then I ran a very tough race against then Senator Obama, as we all remember. And he won and I lost, and then he turns around and asks me to be Secretary of State because he trusts my judgment and my experience, because we've gone through the fire together. So that's what I have to try to convey in the best way I know how to the American people. I will go through the fire for you and with you. I will do whatever I can to fix the problems in this country and to lift up everybody who Okay, now I know we don't have time for too many more, and I always hate this point at it because I don't want to disappoint anybody. We got a lot of hands up here. This man in the red shirt right there. Yes, sir. Yes, yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Reza Jalili, and I'm professor of business here at New England College. Welcome. As you know, we have a lot of candidates coming to New Hampshire and so forth. I had this question for a few years in my mind. I never asked any candidate because I wasn't sure whether they're going to be president or not. But I can assure you, you are the next president of the United States. For that reason, I'm going to ask you this question. I know we are fighting the terrorism in many, many grounds, military, cyberspace, PR, etc. But I think there is one aspect that has been neglected, and that is the undercurrent ideology and theology that gives birth to this interpretation of jihadi Islam. And I know Islam can be interpreted differently. There are different versions of it. However, not much effort, logistic, financial, and so forth, is given to people who can do this. And obviously, this has to be done by Muslims within Islam. So my question to you is, what would you do as a president to help Muslims to provide and offer the new polished version of Islam? Thank you.
Really, really important question, and I would love to have your thoughts on this because, you know, there's a struggle going on inside Islam. You know, King Abdullah of Jordan and others have spoken out and said that this struggle is it's going to be transformational one way or the other. And there is a lot of concern among the Muslim leaders that I know and that I have spent time with talking about this, about the best way to try to approach this. What would be considered authoritative? Whose voices would be listened to further isolate the jihadi interpretation? I, as president, don't think it would be fruitful for me to lay out a strategy, but I can assure you, as president, I would do everything I could to support Muslim leaders, academics, as well as government leaders, those who might have an audience. And I know there's been some effort underway already to try to do that, and I hope that that can take hold. But this is a very, very consequential period for Islam. You've got what is in effect a big split between Saudi Arabia and Iran going on. You've got terrorist groups laying claim to the caliphate, calling other Muslims apostates. You've got strife in many parts of the Muslim world against minorities. And there does need to be a concerted effort on the part of respected Muslim leaders. And I think it has to come from within Muslim society, but I think it could be generated and helped along by Muslim leaders, by academics here in the United States, in Europe, Canada, and elsewhere, because there are some very, as you know, there's some very well-regarded Islamic experts at universities here in the West. They might not be able to get through to the jihadists, but they could get through to a larger population. And I think that as president, I will do what I can to try to promote that, but not take a public leading role in it, because I don't think that would be a fruitful approach. But I think your question goes right to the heart of so many of the current conflicts we have. And I think that, you know, American leaders have tried very hard, you know, starting, and I give President George W. Bush credit. After 9/11, he went, as you might recall, to an Islamic center and said, we cannot be biased, we cannot be prejudiced, we are not fighting against a religion, we're fighting against terrorists. President Obama just visited a mosque with this very same message. So I think that the American president's voice is very important to try to encourage respect, tolerance, openness, but without wading in to take a position on what are truly religious issues. But having said that, it's one of the reasons why I think, I think Donald Trump and the other Republicans are so dangerous, because when they say what they've said about Muslims, that's not just heard in the United States. It doesn't just stay within some big arena. That is broadcast to the world. And you have American Muslims feeling left out, isolated, ignored, not wanted, when in fact we should be pulling our country together against terrorism, and that would include everybody, and American Muslims are most likely to be on the front lines of that. And they should be embraced, as we did after 9/11. And we need to recommit to doing that. But it's not just in America we need to do that. I mean, those messages are heard across the Muslim world. More than 1 billion people hearing a man running to be president of the United States and others in his same party making really offensive comments about Muslims. And then we have to put together a coalition, which I know something about how hard it is, to bring Muslim nations together to defeat ISIS. And so you have to go and you say, you know, I know it's been all over your media, what has been said, but don't pay any attention to that. We're going to work together. It makes it harder. So this is both a religious and a political challenge that we have to figure out the best way to address. And I really thank you for asking it, because it's a really profound question about how we're going to move our efforts forward against ISIS, but more than that, how we're going to avoid this so-called clash of civilizations, which it's not. It's a clash between civilization and barbarity, and we want the vast majority of Muslims on the side with the rest of us against the terrorists who kill more Muslims than anybody else. So that's what it's happening. Mike is running my campaign here, and I always pick him when he gives me the high sign to pick the last questioner, because I can't possibly. Okay. Who are you pointing at, Mike? Okay, yeah. Okay, with the scarf. Here we go. Here comes the microphone. Yeah.
Senator Clinton, earlier you was talking about the people in the LGBT community and how the progress in the gay marriage equally. My question to you is, the people in the LGBT community want economic justice, trans justice. We are facing employment discrimination and lack of health insurance. How will you change that?
Yes, and you absolutely deserve justice, and you deserve equality under the law. That's why I support the Equality Act, which is means to try to outlaw discrimination against the LGBT community. And it was one of the campaign endorsed them on the front line to get justice for the LGBT community, to try to end discrimination. And there are other issues that have to be addressed as well. Violence against transgender women is a terrible problem in so many places in America. We have to do much more to try to support any person in the LGBT community who feels alone and left out, particularly young people, because even though there's been a sea change that you are living through, we all are living through, there are still a lot of kids who are bullied, a lot of kids who are driven to take their own lives, and we need much more support for them. So we have a lot of work to do here at home, and my advocacy for the Equality Act is going to put it on the top of my priority list as president. We'll do everything we can to try to get it done. But I just want to say a final word. You know, I went to Geneva as Secretary of State, gave a speech about, you know, gay rights and human rights. And the reason I did that is not only because I wanted to convey American policy, I wanted to send a message to governments that oppress gays, oppress, imprison, even allow violence against the LGBT community. So we have work to do at home, but we have a lot of work to do around the world. And I started a program at the State Department called the Global Equality Fund to try to support advocates who are standing up for LGBT rights abroad. So I think we have to do everything necessary here at home, but we also can't forget the rest of the world, because a lot of people are really in danger and really, you know, given no chance to lead themselves. And that has to be part of our agenda as well. Thank you all very much.